We light our chalice flame today, as chalice flames are lit in our brother and sister congregations across the world. And as we light this flame, we will hear words from the minister, the Reverend Barbara Peskin. Somewhere, between the stars and the earth's core, we live and weep. We ask and laugh and answer. How can we not be amazed? Let the light and the darkness bless each other and bless us. Welcome. Welcome to you today. Welcome to this, the Sevenoaks Unitarian Meeting House. Our service today is, as has been the case for many weeks and months now, a virtual service. And it's actually a year ago that we closed this meeting house in the preparation for the coronavirus and the lockdown that was coming. We held a Lent service, and then we were gone. And so I'm reminded this week of Lent. I'm reminded of things that have happened over the last year, reflecting on the changes, reflecting on the things that we could never have anticipated. Our service today is about Lent, it's about reflection, but it's also about not giving up. Traditionally, Lent means giving up something. But I think we can look deeper than that. It's about not giving up something. We will hear words, we will hear music, we will gather in prayer and in stillness. I welcome you to this service this morning. This time, this space are yours. I bid you welcome. Our first hymn today is a hymn that voices our wishes for change. At this time, as we start to move towards spring, not quite there, but thinking about making ourselves anew, a Lenten hymn perhaps. I wish I knew how. The words will be on your screens.
I
We're in the traditional season of Lent, a time of reflection in the early weeks of spring to Easter. And our first reading is a traditional reading for this time, and it is biblical. Sort of. It's a reinterpretation of the Bible. It's not trying to capture the youth market, they rarely seem to work, but instead it's a radical retelling of a well-known gospel story. And this is from a book within that book called Good News from a Jewish Friend. And those who know their Bibles might actually know this Jewish friend as Matthew. Jesus felt he needed to take some time in the desert to be clear in his mind which direction his life should take. He went without food for about 6 weeks. By then he was near to starvation, and the thought came to him, if I am God's chosen one, all I need to do is order these stones to become bread. And then he remembered some words from the old books. People cannot live just on bread. They need God's words as well. Then he had another idea. He saw in his mind's eye the worship centre in Jerusalem. Perhaps if I were to jump off the highest point, I could prove I come from God. It should work like the song, God has friends who only wait to catch you as you fall. Your feet will gently touch the ground without a scratch at all. But then Jesus thought again of some other words from the old books. You must not push your God too far. Then his mind formed another picture. This time he seemed to be looking down from a very high mountain on all the countries of the world. And Jesus thought, all this could easily be mine. All I have to do is be cunning and gain the support of the right people. Jesus quickly dismissed these ideas. He thought, these are the ways of evil. The old books tell us the only way we should try to please, the only one we should try to please, is God. And then Jesus felt at peace, and some of God's helpers arrived to look after him. That was a reworking of the words of Matthew by John Henson. Let us come together now in a time of prayer. God of our hearts, whose oneness makes us one. In an unquiet world, let us be quiet. In an unpeaceful world, let us be peace. In an unkind world, let us be kind. In an unjust world, let us be just. In an unloving world, let us be love. O source of life and love, mystery beyond our ideas, as we gather this hour, we remember all of life's possibilities. We embrace the limits, grateful for a world awaiting the work of our minds and our hearts. We recall that our solitude and individuality is not all we are made for, that a wider communion of friendship beckons us. We struggle with a vision of a world made whole by loving justice. We forgive ourselves rather than denying the good that remains within us. We accept others rather than sitting in judgment over them. We constantly seek greater insight, greater honesty, and perpetual love. We seek the strength to enter into life fully, so that we can share and serve, so that we can bring light where there are shadows, and liberation where there is despair. Such is our prayer, our vision, and our hope this day. If you wish to, please join with me in the words of our final prayer, following the words on your screens. Spirit of life, light everlasting, may the glorious returning rays pierce the depths of our hearts. May they purify, gladden, lighten and enrich us. We each of us harbour dark corners in our hearts, places of sadness, places of unworthy thoughts, places of good things left undone. May the light we receive today restore us. May the light we receive today bring us peace. May the light we receive today bring us into new life. In light, we might find hope. Amen. Our second reading is by Bruce T. Marshall, Unitarian Universalist minister. And this is, quite simply, Lent. The season of Lent takes place on the Christian calendar for 40 days before Easter. Lent does not exactly catch the popular fancy. Many of the references I hear trivialise it. This time, I'm giving up liver for Lent. Or treat it as an opportunity for a commercial proposition. Macaroni and cheese, the perfect meal for Lent. Lent is defined as a time of fasting and penitence in preparation for Easter. In this day and age, both fasting and penitence may seem quite peculiar. And yet, during this season of Lent, when the earth is still barren from winter, our lives too may seem on hold, waiting for a miracle. It's a time when I become deeply aware of the sufferings in the congregation, in the community, in the world. On any given day, we all look pretty much all right, but beneath the appearances, many struggle. It's a time when I revisit the sorrows I have caused others. Old memories that hide from the summer's sun and spring's brilliant colours and excitement of autumn activities, these make themselves known during this fallow time of the year. It's a time when doing nothing seems the appropriate way to nourish our spirituality. As the earth still is doing without, as we reach the end of our store of energy and spirit that was gathered and packed away during the harvest. Now we do without and await a world of hope, the promise of a future. Religious liberals sometimes are accused of wanting Easter without Lent or Good Friday. Now, given our attitude of hope and affirmation, we may skip past the struggles that give birth to new life. But I've not found that to be true. Suffering and struggle come to us, whether there's room in our theology for it or not. The faith that speaks to this experience is not specifically Christian. It is universal. That there is meaning in our struggles, that we may be transformed in our suffering, that Easter awaits beyond the barrenness of this season of Lent. The words of Bruce T. Marshall. We come now to our second hymn, with words by Alicia S. Carpenter, a reminder perhaps of our connections to the world around us, and how the effect of our personal actions, good and bad, can be felt throughout the world. Let us celebrate the web of life. The words will be on your screens. "40 days. 40 days from the Ash Wednesday start of Lent through to Easter. Now this year, we're already quite a way through Lent. I usually like to take a good look at Lent as we start the season, but other ideas and themes have been around this year. So we'll look at Lent today. We're already 16 days in of the 40 days. But there's an important and impossible point that some days, for some reason, are not included in Lent. So we're not, if you're watching this on a Sunday, in Lent right now. We were yesterday and we will be tomorrow. But those 40 days don't include Sundays. But one of the good reasons for looking at Lent a little bit later than we normally do is to see how it's coming along. We often talk about it at the start, but then we forget about it. But this year, perhaps something different. Now, I noted earlier on in our service today that this Sunday is actually the anniversary of the last Sunday service we held in here before lockdown in 2020. We've had a handful of services later in the year in restricted circumstances, but our final full attendance service was a year ago, and it was the Lent service. Now, Lent is, according to a custom, a time to give up those things that are said to be bad for you. Inevitably, it's something you quite like chocolate or strong coffee or alcohol or sugar. But clearly something that you believe, or someone's persuaded you to believe, is not good for you. And this is a custom and a tradition that has a far broader appeal than those just attending Christian churches or even Unitarian meeting houses. Lent's a time in the annual cycle where millions across the country, across the world, will seek to give something up. Now, at that service 12 months ago, where we talked about giving something up for the next few weeks, who could possibly have realised exactly what we would be giving up at that time? Now, from the petty, the inconvenience of closed shops and cancelled holidays, to the tragic loss of friends, of friendships, of loved ones, and everything in between, the stories of loss, of what we gave up, are varied and unique to each of us. But we have all been touched by COVID in one way or another, and it provides a common link to our lived experience. Our Lent 2020, has been long and relentless, to coin a phrase. I think it's fairly safe to say that the Lenten journey has been unprecedented. But what is Lent? Well, as with so many customs and traditions, the idea of Lent has come from religious practices. And this one comes from the Christian stories. And it comes from the period that the Christian church liturgically has celebrated or remembered in the run-up to Easter. However, one of the intriguing things is, in the Bible story of Lent, of the time of Jesus in the desert, it doesn't link to the crucifixion at all. It doesn't link to Jesus' arrest and trial and execution. It's something completely different. Instead, this time is inspired by a story from Matthew's Gospel. It's only in one Gospel, which may or may not suggest it could be a little untrue. But it's a story of Jesus at the beginning of his ministry, arguably just before his ministry. He's said to have gone, after being baptized by John the Baptist in the River Jordan, he's said to have gone out into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. Now, by chance, 40 is a very common number in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Christian Old Testament, and the Christian New Testament too. There's lots of 40s. This is sending a message. This is talking about something being really important. 40 days and 40 nights in the desert. Now, we heard a version of the story of Jesus in the desert as our first reading today, but that wasn't the original. And the original is a very, very visual story. As I say, it only appears in Matthew, but it's a story of Jesus going into the desert and getting hungrier and hungrier, as you would, given the desert traditions we all know from modern-day Israel. To be stuck out in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights would be tough. So in that original version, Jesus is tempted 3 days or 3 times over the 40 days he's there. And in the original story, probably written in Greek, but certainly the oldest versions we know are written in Greek, and then we have the King James translation. In this, Jesus is visited by the devil himself, and he's encouraged to make stones into bread, to jump from a temple tower, to become ruler of the world. And Jesus, as you would expect, is said to have refused to follow the advice of Satan and stays holy and true to his God. We would expect nothing else. Now, the story is a classic build in tension for dramatic effect. He's tempted to create bread in the desert, very low thing, and then to jump from the temple, a little more grand, and finally to take over the world in an all-conquering dictatorship. But of course he manages to stave off the devil. He staves off Satan and he avoids temptation. Now it's this idea of temptation that the traditional season of Lent takes its ideas from. We're holding out against temptation. We're deliberately avoiding wicked things. Those things that the devil on our shoulder will be deliberately encouraging us to do, to eat, to enjoy, perhaps even to steal. In tradition, therefore, Lent is the period where we're all directed to make a point of standing against temptation. Now, one of the problems for us in thinking about this as Unitarians is Unitarians will not, and I don't think I've ever met one, believe that Satan is real. The devil does not exist. So who are these temptations coming from? Who are we fighting off? Well, there's only one answer really, isn't there? Because it's us. Now, the rewrite of that famous story that we heard today, the rewrite by John Henson from his book Good as New, doesn't mention the devil at all. In the story we heard earlier, we hear a story of a near-starving man in the desert, as before, but he's starting to grapple with his inner thoughts. There's no external pressure. Jesus is wrestling with his own conscience, with the ideas that come into his head when alone in the desert, for 40 days and for 40 nights, with very little food or water. This is self-reflection. This is Jesus realizing that he has these tempting thoughts coming to him. And he knows that he must overcome those temptations if he is to live a life of love in the world. Those demons are not external, they are internal. And we all of us have them. Each and every one of us has inner demons that are telling us to do things. They're not something separate. It's our own conscience. Something telling us, our voice inside telling us that we might do something we know we shouldn't. And no matter how hard we always try to do the right things, to say the best things, to make sure all our actions and words are delivered with love, we do give in occasionally, perhaps unwittingly, to the thoughts for something we know deep down is really wrong. John Henson uses that wonderful phrase, the thought came to him. Not the devil appeared, the thought came to him. Now it was through focus on the good in his life. It was on focus of his faith, of his belief in a world of good, that enabled Jesus to overcome those thoughts, to correct those temptations that he was putting to himself. And that surely is a good lesson. It's a good lesson of being able to override dark thoughts. It's something we're all able to do at some time. It takes time, it takes patience, it takes honest reflection. Yet the true victor in all of this is that by wanting to live in God or in good or in helping bring this world to a sensible place and to a good place, we can live a life of love and compassion, and we can overcome our temptations. Now, all this self-reflection has been particularly poignant for all of us over the last 12 months, since that last week down before lockdown was first called, last weekend. And these have not been easy times for anyone. There have been times when the thought comes to us that hope is disappearing. There have been times when the thought have come to us to be tempted to do something we know we perhaps shouldn't have done. It may be something really little. We've been tempted, I'm sure, to meet people when we know we shouldn't really be doing it, to stretch the rules, to stretch the rule of 6, the rule of 2. We've been tempted to travel a little further than we should. A thought comes to us. Yet we've also managed, I'm equally sure, we've also managed to counter most, if not all, of those temptations with the considered acceptance of why we're expected to do them. The need to work with love and compassion with our neighbours, to protect one another, to bring a world of good. And it's been hard. It's been hard for all of us to see that bigger picture, to calm our willingness to follow paths we know are not quite right. And those thoughts probably still come to us. But more importantly, 12 months on, there is hope. There is still hope. Things are changing. Things are getting better. Things are improving for most. Now, in our second reading, Bruce T. Marshall reminded us of the bigger picture that Lent provides. As he put it,
"And yet, during this season of Lent, when the earth is still barren from winter, our lives too may seem on hold, waiting for a miracle. It's a time when I become deeply aware of the sufferings in the congregation, in the community, in the world. On any given day, we all look pretty much all right, but beneath the appearances, many struggle. It's a time when I revisit the sorrows I have caused others. Old memories that hide from the summer's sun and spring's brilliant colours and excitement of autumn activities, these make themselves known during this fallow time of the year. It's a time when doing nothing seems the appropriate way to nourish our spirituality. As the earth still is doing without, as we reach the end of our store of energy and spirit that was gathered and packed away during the harvest, now we do without and await a world of hope, the promise of a future.
My Lenten practice this year, my giving up for Lent, if you like, is to try and change myself for the better. Not just for the 40 days to Easter, but also beyond that. Permanently. And I know it can be done. I'm sure it can be done. It's a deliberate, don't give up kind of giving up. A battle not with external temptation, but instead with my inner self, with my own quirky life and my bad habits. Not too many, obviously. And maybe this is something we can all do. Not giving up on the future, not giving up on the role we can play in making the world a better place. Not giving up that, but instead stopping the temptation, challenging our own thoughts at times, and remembering we're here for each other. We support each other, our fellow humans, our neighbours, people we've never met. We help each other through these difficult times. We're in the midst of 40 days of Lent 2021, yet we know inside we've just reached the 12th month of Lent 2020. Yet new beginnings, better days are in reach. The patience required to reach them safely is often unbearable. Yet we know deep inside, deep beyond the voices telling us otherwise, We know we can get there. Not giving up has been the motto of these last 12 months. And we're reminded more than ever of the value of patient reflection, of preparing for new beginnings. We reflect, we rebuild, we look to our new beginnings. Don't give up. Let us take some time to settle ourselves. Let us join together in a time of stillness and reflection. As you settle your bodies, perhaps closing your eyes, focusing on your breath, I shall read some words, and I shall strike the singing bowl, and we'll come together in stillness and quiet. I shall break that stillness with music to continue our reflections. As we settle our bodies. Some words from the American poet and author Ella Wheeler Wilcox. In your own self lies destiny. In your own self lies destiny.
Some closing words. In the name of us all, let there be peace and love among us. May the skies be clear. May the streets be safe. In the name of us all, let there be peace.